Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of our Future Tech podcast series, where it's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group, where I interview thought leaders, chief technology leaders, people who are just leading the way essentially within their businesses, asking them about their story, a bit about technology, what's really exciting them, and specifically about their business, and that all-important career advice at the end for many of our listeners. We're into series 4 now. And great news, the podcast is now over 5,000 Spotify subscribers with 33 universities partnered up. So thank you to everyone who's been following and liking this podcast. And hopefully today's show will continue the theme. I'm really, really pleased to have John Mort and Neal with me today. John is the head of engineering and Neal is the CIO of Adaptavist. And Adaptavist is a global technology and innovative solutions provider. They help organizations boost agility and overcome the challenges of digital transformation. So a pretty exciting business. And founded in 2005, and they've grown to over 13,000 customers now. So this company's also gone through phenomenal growth. So it'll be great to hear a bit about that from the two guys, as well as their story. So John and Neal, welcome to the show.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So let's jump straight into it. And John, let's start with you. Would you mind telling us a bit about your story, please?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of got into kind of playing and messing around with computers on a sort of an older Amstrad PC and it had like these sort of pair of 5.25-inch floppy drives and things, and it would take 10 minutes, just get an operating system booted up and things. It was just really basic system and things, but it was amazing to just kind of get started with, and it was very much kind of experience of like copying kind of programs in from a magazine. It's that classic sort of thing. But we were kind of putting in like adventure games and they sorts of things. And yeah, that kind of like kick-started my like, this is cool. I love tech like this. And kind of from there, a bit more basic, realize you can actually change these programs, not just copy them out. There's things you can do with them, and you can change how it works. From there, I kind of fast forward a few years, and the next thing I really kind of there's two things. I played Wolfenstein, and that was like vividly remember playing that sort of game at a friend's house. I was like, what I want to do is build computer games. That's what I want to do with my life. I want to build things like this. Then I think I can't remember where exactly where the timeline is, but it sort of do a bit of plays at Doom, and I realized I can build levels. Right, this is the first step towards building my own computer games. And then we got a new PC with Voodoo 2 graphics card, and then I found OpenGL, and from OpenGL is this graphics programming kind of API. It's like I can do all these things, and there's this scene called the demo scene programming, which is, I think, it's gone on for a really long time. It's still active today, which is trying to build really complex graphical sort of experiences, but in its really little code. So I thought, I'll give this a go, and I suddenly realized I wasn't clever enough. I wasn't clever enough to do that. I didn't know enough. I needed to go and learn a whole lot. So fast forward a few years, I ended up doing a degree in AI, and that was really interesting, and it's been really interesting seeing kind of some of the modern the trends right now of where kind of AI and machine learning coming on. It's like it's not really there's not a lot new here, but as part of my degree, there was an industry year, which was the best thing I did. The entire part of my degree, and I spent a year working with a team. A company called 3Com, and it was a year full of experiences. The team there was brilliant, but to kind of set the scene a little bit, in my first week, I was dragged into. I wasn't supposed to be there, but my boss said, you should come along and experience this. But basically, about 2/3 of the engineers on the site that I was working at were made redundant by a very happy hatchet guy came in and like, hey everybody, we're moving all your jobs to China, was basically the thing, because we've got this brand new, really exciting joint venture. And so my boss is, so we weren't, our little group wasn't affected, but my boss was like, you have to experience that. And that kind of set the tone for that team, was wanted to give me lots of really great experiences, and it was a really brilliant experience. It wasn't my first choice of company that I wanted to go to. They were kind of like, but it was the absolute best experience, because I was right there in there. And I ended up joining them after uni, which objectively seemed like a silly thing to have done, because companies shrinking, it's on the way down. They're increasingly moving like jobs out of the UK, but I wanted to join that team because that team was brilliant, and they really nurtured me. They were a really great environment. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit more, we actually got made redundant. Actually, we did actually get made redundant. This thing is, the writing was on the wall, so then happened. Then spent a year attempting to do a startup, and we built this brilliant product. It was like really great things there, but we had no customers, and at the end of the year we had no money. So it was like 3 engineers, and we basically failed because we had no sales, no marketing, no business plan. But we had a great product. And then sort of out the back of that, I ended up joining Adaptavist, and I started Adaptavist. So my first job title was Java developer, but at that point Adaptavist was like 12 people, and job title really didn't mean anything. I did sysadmin and did consulting, did like basically anything, load of sales and stuff as well. So, but that was really great experience. And then from there, I've got into so yeah, doing consulting, leading teams, building products, and now I've been here like 11 years. So it's been this like a really rich environment to learn stuff and try stuff and then things, and yeah, and just been picking up more and more responsibility as I've gone along, basically.
Yeah, well, fantastic, and we'll pick up definitely on, because having the 10 years with one business and your career growth within that company is a really, because nowadays I think a lot of our listeners are thinking 2-3 years in a gig and move on, and although you get a lot of learns from that, if you can find a business that actually pushes you and you can grow in that company, and every other couple of years you're hitting a promotion, you can grow, can't you? You can develop yourself sometimes better than if you're moving around, if you're in the right business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just identifying and taking opportunities, I think that's one of the things. It's one of the things I think Adaptavist is really strong at, is allowing people to sort of identify and think, hey, I want to go do that, or I want to try that, and there's things like, because one kind of quick example of that is one guy who was he was working in finance until so in the finance team, but was doing quite a lot of the tech stuff and things there, and he was like, I'd like to try, like, could I try being an engineer? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's give this a go, see what the things there, and he's been brilliant. Yeah, he's doing really great. Yeah, and he's like a real key team member on the tech team. So kind of, yeah, there's opportunities like that. You just need to take them.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you, John. And so from your way of sort of from building computers as a kid and games to the way you want to go, Neal, how about you? How did you get into tech in your story?
John's story is so interesting to me, because John had the life that I think I wanted when I was 24 years old. Like, John had a technical prowess that I never really was gifted with. I had to sort of scrimp and scrape to get where I am in that kind of capacity. I learned other skills, which is great, but being at a company 10 years, you know, all of these sorts of things, doing work experience, which I never did. It's interesting to see the dichotomy. The one thing that is both of our Achilles heels, for me, it's Cal 2 and OpenGL. OpenGL was absolutely the thing that broke my development back. I realized just the upper bound of what I could do. But suffice it to say, my favorite way to tell the story about my career is I started as a hibachi chef. If you don't know what that is, that's the Japanese steakhouse where they cook things in front of you.
Yeah.
That's where I was making my money to go to school. I was very lucky. I went to school in the University of Alabama, and I was very lucky to be a member of what is referred to as the New College. The New College was a school that was founded on the principles of the New School at NYU, and it was basically an interdisciplinary degree where all of the faculty members were co-assigned to other parts of the university complex. So you had people from the finance department, you had people, or business school, you had people from engineering, you had people from psychology. They were all all part of this interdisciplinary group, and they were directly working with you trying to develop whichever degree plan you wanted to go and do. So when I started at the University of Alabama, I was in a music degree, if you'd believe it. I'm a euphonium player from 20 years ago. Haven't picked it up in 15, but neither here nor there. The point is, when I found myself in New College, I realized that there was quite a lot in the world that I wanted to learn, and I had no real path to learn it. So exactly what you're describing, most of your listeners right now who are thinking about, well, 2 years and done. When I first got started in my career, if I got to 2 years, I was doing good. I was bouncing around quite a lot. When I first started in New College, I actually started in industrial psychology, which is a terrifying program. If any one of you who are listening is in this program, by all means, apologies in advance, but the way they taught it at the time was certainly not something that made me excited about these kinds of things. However, later in my life, I come back to behavioral economics and very similar things, albeit in a different format. But yeah, as I was in school, my degree that I made up, or founded myself, was digital synthesis of audio and video. It is a degree which is basically around making digital music instruments. That's where I got my start. So I taught myself every bit of coding that I ever did. It was one of those self-taught things that I put down for quite a long time. Unfortunately, but I pick it back up right after I'm leaving university, working a sound gig at a bar. So I was basically the front of house sound guy. And I realized very quickly that the equipment that we were using, I understood some of the acoustics, I understood some of the trigonometry involved, but I also understood enough of coding, having built some kind of basics instruments, that my first entry into development really is actually DMX lighting. So if you've ever gone to a concert, it turns out all of the lighting that you see is traveling over ostensibly MIDI cables, and they are individually addressable and blah, 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 blah. Going down this process, I found myself in a rabbit hole where I realized that, hey, actually development is something that's pretty cool and I can really get into that, which is when I discovered OpenGL existing and realizing that was a bridge too far. So my first sort of foray into technology really after that comes MaxMSP. And if you've never used MaxMSP in the world, I highly encourage you to check it out. It is by far one of the greatest programming environments of all time. It is a variant, a sort of fork of Pure Data, which is the open source version, which is absolutely incredible. I have built functioning applications on it. John and I together have built music instruments on it in our spare time. Absolutely incredible stuff. But as I was going through and doing what I was calling creative coding, or sort of my sound and video gigs, I was working sound gigs. I was working as a live visualist for musicians. So I was the guy standing behind them on a big array of things that if I press this button, every light in the building goes red. If I press that button, the video plays behind the DJ, that kind of thing, which was great, absolutely wonderful. But it very quickly made me realize that I did not want tinnitus, and I did not really want to work between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning, just not what I wanted to do. So I found myself working in IT gigs and customer support gigs, actually, which got me to San Francisco, California, where I was working for a university doing late night tech support. And that's when I basically found my first real technology job. which I was very lucky. I was searching for a job that was different than what I was doing then. I had not really had any experience beyond working sort of IT support or customer support. And I was very lucky to find Atlassian. So if you know Jira, if you know Confluence, you know Bitbucket, so that's the people that make those. They're really great people. Now a massive multinational company. At the time, it was basically a small hub of Amsterdam, San Francisco, and Sydney, where it was founded. And it was absolutely wonderful. And I joined as a knowledge manager, which is essentially a project manager and a business analyst and knowledge-centered support rolled into one, a job I had never done before, but basically studied for the better part of 3 months to try to get ready for, which thankfully I did. And it all takes off from there. Basically, since then, I had been working in startups. I worked for a little company called Beats Music, which was acquired by Apple to turn into Apple Music. I only worked there for a month. Apple was not the place for me. It's the place for a lot of my friends, but for me, it wasn't the best. And then I find myself sort of bouncing around in different sort of work, but all related to something like business analysts and product management. And when I joined Adaptavist 5 years ago, almost to the month, I joined as a product manager working on one of their SaaS platforms, which was absolutely a rocket ship of a ride. You go from having not really worked on a lot of products or any of those kinds of things in the past to a product like ScriptRunner, which is one of the apps that Adaptavist makes, which was turning over 7 figures, 8 figures a year. And it was incredible. It was a huge sort of learning exercise, quite a lot of astronomical growth going on, all the challenges and all the opportunities that come with that. And throughout that process, I realized that my roots going back to the days when I was working in IT is actually the place where I'm most interested. The thing that I find quite often is the information that companies generate, they do not make the best use of. And actually treating organizations like organisms, putting an environment in place where people can learn better, communicate better, those kinds of things is absolutely the stuff I'm passionate about. So right on a year and a half ago, I was asked to take the role of Chief Information Officer, which I accepted. And it's been an absolutely incredible time and an incredible, again, learning experience. I will say I'm one of those examples of fake it till you make it for most of my 20s. In my 30s, I've made it and I'm making best use of it. But if you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're not necessarily the most optimal candidate for something, or if you feel like you've never done that job title before, so you absolutely can't apply, I can absolutely tell you do apply anyway. The rejections I've gotten from people for jobs I wasn't ready for was probably one of the best learning experiences ever. If you can find yourself in a position where someone will be honest with you about, you know what, you're not there yet because of that, absolutely great. But had you not applied for those things, you never find yourself in those positions where you get that learning experience, right? So yeah, and I have to say, coming back to the thing John said, I've been here 5 years. That's probably one of the longer tenures in my career at a company. And frankly, not to make John blush, but John is probably one of the reasons why I'm still here. And you'll find yourself in situations when you join organizations of a size like ours, small, medium businesses that are growing, or even larger organizations like that, where people who stayed that amount of time are the reasons why people stay. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but bear with the thought. The fact is, John, in the way that he's been able to grow in his career and continue to learn, is actually sort of enticing and encouraging other people to do the exact same thing alongside John. And you find people like this in every company I've ever worked in. There's always been these kinds of people who are absolutely pinnacle and paramount to your own success just by being around them and learning what they're doing. When John's breaking apart a problem, in fact, we've got a team of people on our sort of SWAT teams that we take on large issues that come to the organization. Watching those people work is almost as important as putting your own ideas out there and solving those things. And if you ever find people like John who have been working in organizations that long, hang out to them, buy them a cup of coffee, because they will teach you all kinds of stuff that they don't even know is trapped in their own brains. It's interesting times, but neither here nor there.
Wow. And what a great a compliment to John. Well done, mate. But I totally agree with you as well. Looking at it from the outside in of businesses, when you retention and being able to offer careers, and those people who fulfill those career opportunities are the best mentors, guides, and collaborators you can get. But also it's companies that are made up of many different people, I guess, is also equally important. And Neal, your openness there about how, you know, jumping around from sort of the early gigs and deciding what you wanted to do, but then having the confidence to apply and put yourself out there for roles maybe too bigger or what have you, that learning curve. I couldn't agree with you more. That really does put your self-learning curve through the roof. And you know, what a rapid rise as well, I guess, because within the business, joining as a senior product manager and within 5 years nearly to CIO, that's down to capability and drive, I guess. So, you know, people can do it, can't they? You can have rapid growth.
Yeah, it's also a lot of luck. And it's very interesting. My mother is a math teacher. My father flew helicopters. Both of them come across this problem the exact same way, which is you make the luck that you get. So I've been very lucky that the organization needed that kind of, there was a void that was needing to be filled. There was that kind of need in the organization, but I was at a position where I was ready to fill that void. So the luck is the void is there. But the fact is I had done the pre-work, I had put in the time. And so lucky for me, that was the place that we are. The reality is you're not always going to be in a position where that's going to be the case. You sort of have to be okay with that. But the fact is when you are there, you need to be ready. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's an interesting situation you find yourself in, you know, when those things align, let's say that.
Yeah. And again, I totally agree. So let's move on then and talk about some of the exciting stuff that you guys are doing. You know, and what I also loved, I picked up on the comment that in your spare time you're building some music software, or you do stuff together as well as a bit of a passion. So it's quite clearly that technology is in the blood, I should say. So what's exciting you guys now when you're thinking about tech and what the business is doing or what you're passionate about? Maybe John, for you, what's really on your mind?
So I think this might come across a little bit. It may be a little bit boring, but it's kind of really key, because we're at the point now where there's so many kind of platforms and things which you can kind of compose together, and things like SaaS platforms, and it means that you can like building on those services, like, you know, kind of, I guess the glib thing is standing on the shoulders of giants. Sort of, you can compose together systems and prototype things exceedingly quickly. So like pulling together like something from an author provider, you can kind of run on a kind of infrastructure platform and things, and you don't need to think about all of the things that you might have, you know, 10, 15 years ago, thinking about standing up a server and you know, managing an authentication database and scaling and all those sorts of things. You can go from like nothing to a production level service like in minutes, like literally now. And the things using the right kinds of tools and the right sorts of attitude and like, so that I think the barrier of entry for building those sorts of things is massively lower. So like, and going to kind of examples are like, if you were wanting to do some AI stuff. So in my degree, you needed to, well, sort of get a cluster together, sort of rent some time on the things, get your data set together, all of those, you know, and you'd be choosing your algorithms. You know, you needed to know all of the details about everything. Like you can go to Amazon or Google, like, and just use an off-the-shelf AI platform. You can just try it. It doesn't take you any time really to things, and it's really low risk to go off and do that. Whereas it would have been like, you know, 10, 15 years ago, it would have been a big investment to go and just sort of do that thing. So you can just try it. And you've got these short feedback cycles that you can fail fast with, but also you can compose together the systems that are, yeah, just really powerful. So it's not a, I don't think it's anything kind of revolutionary, but it's just like building on these evolutionary cycle of things where we can build on things. And and the interconnectivity of those sorts of things.
Yeah, brilliant. And so Neal, for you, building on that, and maybe thinking about the strategy of where Adaptavist specifically or tech, where do you see it moving to?
I mean, not surprisingly, I agree with John almost implicitly, but certainly explicitly. The fact is, combining a small group of things, a small group of running services, and you have Jarvis from the Iron Man from Marvel movies, right? Like it's incredible to see the exponential multipliers that happen as some of these services start coming together and unlocking different capabilities. I mean, it's Alexa, it's a couple other tiny services and a couple other kind of easy things that do automatic Google searches, and you have exactly what was in comic books dreamed about, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, in modern days. It's absolutely incredible. Riffing on one of the concepts John was talking about in the technology industry in general, John and I were talking about this around, if you were starting out right now, if this is the day that you were leaving your university, what would you be looking at? To me, I think the OpenAI initiative and what's going on in the world of machine learning and some of these kinds of things are absolutely the next hyper growth area in technology. I think in the same way that infrastructure engineers and operations engineers in the world of quote unquote DevOps, where that was 20 years ago, right now, if I was starting out a career, that's exactly where I'd be focusing my time, because some of the breakthroughs that are coming out of that world are solving genomes, making healthcare not only more efficient, but more cost efficient, not just medically efficient, biologically efficient. They're solving problems of game theory, which in and of themselves, a computer beating a chess master is an interesting concept, but what happens beyond that is absolutely spectacular. And I think exactly what John's talking about in terms of lowering the sort of scale, lowering the bar or the barrier to entry, some of these fields are absolutely doing that. And I think AI is one of these that was a bridge too far for many people for quite a long time. But the basic interpreter that comes with your Mac in Python is enough to get off the ground, which is crazy. Like that kind of thing, if you think back to when John and I were starting our careers, just absolutely would not have even happened. And we are not as long in the tooth as others of our counterparts, right? Specifically on Adaptavist, we're looking at these kinds of barriers to entry, not just in these highly technical fields like AI and machine learning and these kinds of things. We're also looking at where the barrier to entry to technology has sort of locked out what we're classifying or has been classified as citizen developers. So people who want to optimize their daily life, who do not want to do the quote unquote boring work, but do find themselves in a position where they do not know how to write code. They're not skilled in sort of systems engineering or software engineering. What we're trying to do, and one of the areas that we're focused on as an organization, is sort of lowering that barrier to entry to make everyone's daily life better, thing number one, and to prepare you for radical shifts in the organizations and the environments that you operate in. Now, we came up with this sort of path before 18 months ago, but the fact is the past 18 months have been a very good example of the kinds of resiliency that we need in all these different organizations. Our organization, it was very interesting to watch us. We did not really experience very much in terms of our continuity problems. We, of course, had every problem that every other organization had and every government and every country had, where health problems and these kinds of things, people were sick. We have lost some of our counterparts, which is a terrible place to be. The reality is, for every other bit of how we're operating and how we're working together, we did the best that we could. And frankly, we excelled in some of these areas where we saw some of our counterparts, some of our customers struggling, right? Now, this all came down to our ability to be remote and resilient, but it also really was focused on our ability to adapt. That part of our name is an intentional choice, right? The fact is, what we're trying to do, one of the ways we're trying to help others is to help them adapt themselves. So one of the services that we've just come out with is a product called Autoblocks. So Autoblocks.com, if you haven't seen it before, it is basically a low code, all damn near no code environment for connecting systems and integrating them together, but also automating those sort of tasks that make your life better once they're automated. It's built on an open source framework from Google called Blockly. You may know it if you're in the software engineering space listening to this as Scratch. It's the same underlying principle and underlying framework. So if you think about those bits of technology that have been used by educational institutions to teach people how to code, teach children how to code, we've taken those same principles, built blocks of functionality that actually operate in the sort of project management and the sort of business space, and then allow people to take the exact same sort of organizational thinking and codify it with blocks. And we think this is an integral path to helping individuals make their day better, but also helping organizations make the ability to continuously integrate and continuously iterate on their systems easier. We find organizations that do that, that invest in that kind of work, are the ones that are the darlings of the technology space or each of their respective spaces. John, I don't know if there's other bits on that you wanted to cover, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we've seen as a big trend of, and in the we do this kind of report every year, the state of Atlassian report, where you go to like all tool vendor things. One of the things that came out of there is that companies have got loads and loads and loads of tools, and there needs to be information flow between them, and this is one of the things that Autoblocks kind of is there to enable and to, you know, so have like your project manager or whoever it is who knows the domain and knows the data, to be able to empower them, not as a coder, but as just someone who knows the environment, to be able to link them together to have things operating more smoothly.
And this is really interesting because AI has been a hot topic, and I totally agree with you in machine learning and deep learning. But one of the things that I've heard on the market is an underlying, and I don't know if I'd call it a concern, but a nervousness, especially within the software engineering world, that AI may take over the job of software engineers. You know, if it gets to such a point that there's now tools and they're so automated, where is the future of tech going? Is that something that you hear or you think about when you're thinking about the products you're building?
We joke about it a lot. John, what's the name of the thing from GitHub that just came out?
Copilot is the thing they just released. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, AI in many of these areas many of these different areas is very much in its infancy. Let's say that. I think it's the same sort of, not Luddite, but it's the same sort of fear that comes from AI is going to think like human beings, maybe, possibly. The level of scope and the level of growth that would need to happen in the sort of current research that we have is astronomical. Actually, there's a Royal Institute lecture that's come out, I believe, in the last couple of months, specifically on this topic. I would highly encourage your viewers to watch it. In fact, watch all of the Royal Institution lectures. They are all very, very good, not just the Christmas ones. But suffice it to say, GitHub Copilot is a very interesting example of a use case like this, and sort of the sort of backlash that's come back from it. So GitHub Copilot basically is an AI-driven software development tool, which allows you to basically let GitHub predict what code you want to write. So you write a tiny bit of blurb that you want the code to write in a respective language. GitHub will then pick it up and try to write it for you. It's based on all of the public repositories that are available on GitHub after Microsoft's acquisition. Kind of knew this is the space they were going to go into. If you look on Twitter and if you watch sort of people actually using this in the pre-release, it hasn't gone well, let's say. It could have gone better. The fact is they're trying to iterate and they're trying to teach this algorithm to do quite a lot, but it is not yet at a point where you'd go, I'd like to add two numbers together and it will come up with the most beautiful algorithm. This comes back to a thing that I think is echoed in both John and I's career, which is one way I used to define myself before I was comfortable with calling myself a coder, calling myself a software engineer. So I used to call myself a creative coder. And I think the creativity of the human mind is something that is going to be a bridge too far for AI for quite some time. The fact is the ingenuity of a software engineer, the ingenuity of the human brain in general to go off and come up with new ways to organize the world around them. AI is not really meant to do that. AI doesn't follow that pattern. AI is very much a brute force attack when it comes to approaching these different areas. Now, John, I'm speaking for your entire career in industry, so apologies for that. But to me, I think human ingenuity still holds a place in the world that's coming. I think what might stop happening or might happen less is you do not have to write the very bare metal, low level gubbins and WebAssembly to go off and do what you're trying to do. John, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's an element of things I'm really quite excited about, not having to do some of like the sort of the heavy lifting thing, the sort of detailed algorithm, sort of those sort of things, so that you can be at a level higher with that with the create in that creative zone. Because I don't think that you'd be able to describe, certainly with the current kind of iterations of AI things, like the problems in such a way that the solutions are going to come out in ways that have that human element. Because the user experience, the kind of that the human computer interaction element of a lot of these things is really, really important to making a good product. So you're always going to need that human element for that interaction. But I am quite excited about it removing a whole load of like a lot of the donkey work and frankly quite a lot of the CS 101 like stuff, the algorithms and those sorts of things there, which they're really, really important to learn and as a foundation, but they're not everyday useful. The things they say, and every time you have to go back and learn, I've got to go and open up a book, or you find well, yeah, how do you actually go and implement that? And so they're like job interview useful, and then no one ever uses them properly unless you're in a very specialized area.
I've been thinking about this recently, actually, because if you think about the world of physics is, I think, has already stumbled across this problem and sort of not solved it, but certainly they have a pattern for how to teach these things. When you first learn about electrons, you learn about electrons as atomic things. The reason why you think of them as circles is because that was, way back in the day when they came up with this idea, that was the one thing that you could imagine that couldn't be cut. That's atomic, cannot be cut, cannot be divided. In the world of quantum physics, that is not what an electron is, but the metaphor holds true, right? That there's some truisms around what thinking about electron as a distinct bundle of thing, thinking about a proton as a distinct bundle of a thing. In the world of CS, I think you're still going to learn the very, very basics of CS 101, but you're also going to realize very quickly why you're never going to use that again once you get to a certain level, right? And I think both of those things are very, very good to do. They're very, very good to sort of break into. They're also very good because it helps explain technology to those who are not enlightened in the way of, your degrees of someone listening to this, right? There will be times and reasons why simplifying these things and breaking down the black box will be interesting and will be useful. But John, I couldn't agree more around the human ingenuity bit. I think the reality of the situation is augmenting human beings with the power of artificial intelligence and stuff like that is going to be the direction forward. A good example of this human ingenuity, we have a team of data scientists working for us. One of them, we were discussing a very simple problem in technology, right? You have a bit of code over here or text, you have a bit of code over here or text, doesn't matter. How close are they to each other? So think anti-plagiarism, or just determine whether or not people are copying, pasting from Stack Overflow, which if you do that, shame on you, don't do that, right? So we were discussing, what are some of the methods that we might go about this? Should we use unsupervised learning? Should we use, and our data scientist, our lead data scientist was laughing at us almost openly in a Zoom call. We went, why is this funny to you? He's like, hang on. You can use unsupervised learning. That's fine. That's a sledgehammer. That's perfectly reasonable. You can cut a diamond with a sledgehammer, or you can try. Or here's a very specific ball peen hammer, and he described how he would do it. It's very, very clever. Take all the words in a bit of text, order all the unique words, get the number of times those words are used, call that a vector for that word. So think word and strength of word. If you have two sets of those vectors, you can actually use basic cosine math to see the angle of the sort of aggregate of all vectors to see whether or not those angles are similar, right? I've butchered the way to describe this, but the fact is very, very basic mathematics, very, very basic algebraic quantizations is all you need to solve the problem sometimes. So the world of AI is fascinating. It absolutely is something that you should be looking for the future, in my opinion. But the reality of the situation is you will find yourself very often just going back to your algebra textbook. In fact, I have one sitting on my desk still. Right? It's it's an interesting world, and there are a million different ways to butter one's bread, as they say.
And what a really interesting and insightful, you've been able to just summarize that actually, even in the complexity of AI, less is more, or simplifying something is better than trying to overcomplicate things to the point of it crashing and all the rest of it. And that is a really, really good analogy, I think, because speaking to a lot of students, and I know a lot of our listeners, it can sometimes be quite daunting or even overwhelming when they're thinking about the perceived complexities of technology and where it's going versus what they may have studied, and especially about if their parents were in engineering or anyone a bit older would talk about just learning one language. In my day, it was C++ and it was Java, and I was a specialist, and that's what I did. And now there is languages are being formed every other week, it feels, and it can be very overwhelming. So if you're able to break that down and understand that actually it all comes back to math at the end of it, and there's a process and there's a theory behind it, it shouldn't be that daunting.
Shouldn't be, but always is. And let's be real. Let's be real. Like when you start out in your career, I think one of the things that deterred me from CS for many, many years was that problem. And it took me a long time to get over that and realize that the reality of the situation is every engineer that you meet had to learn that language at some point. Even if they're specialists now, the fact is they didn't start that way. And what's most important really is your ability to take on those underlying concepts. The language that you use and all of that is sort of irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. I mean, it's second order. It's a thing that you'll need to do to understand it. But at the point that you need to care about those kinds of things, you're at Uber's level of data problem.
Yeah.
Like the fact is that needing to understand why you would use protobuf versus that other means by which you would save stuff. I don't even remember in Python how to save stuff anymore, but those kinds of problems are problems of scale, and you'll always be in a position where you can work alongside others who can help you through that scale. The biggest thing you can do is get off the ground with the basics. The syntax is in many ways neither here nor there. To me. Well, now, John, do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, like learn how to learn and learn learn like classes of languages and those sorts of things, how they plumb together is syntax is it's for pull requested debates.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And so what a lovely way to move in then to, we've actually already started it, the last part of the podcast, so the career advice that we'd want to give our listeners. And John, if we start with you, so with, and I think without coining it, if I got it right, learn to learn. What a brilliant bit of advice for our listeners. But thinking around when people are when you're interviewing and the type of how people can stand out in your mind, or what little bits of advice, what have you got for our listeners that might help them get that foot in the door?
So I mean, the most important thing that I'm looking for when I'm hiring is curiosity. Like this go the things I have to. If someone who's thinking about, well, how does this work, or maybe how does this work two levels deep in the things. And so I understand it here, and then I got the foundations of that. Or they're thinking, well, in my previous role or one of the things I was asked to solve this problem, and it was because of this, and you've got this inherent kind of curiosity and interest in the underlying reasons why and other things. I think that's massively important. The other thing is, which is probably equally important, is how it's supposed to be able to work in a team, and it's for me, this was one of the big shocks, and the thing I learned most in my industry year was like software engineering and like development programming is not an individual sport. Like it's a team effort, and it's kind of like the whole education system is set up in order for you to think that it's an individual endeavor, and it was a really, really hard learning things of like, well, I can't just go away and solve this on my own. I have to rely on others. I have to get advice. I have to these things, and people will seek that from me as well, and I have to contribute the goals of the team. So the teamwork is something that we always look for. It's incredibly important when you're kind of hiring. And the one other little bit of advice that I give anybody is just learn a bit of history and looking at this things, particularly in the software things, that a lot of the patterns they repeat, and you can sometimes spot where trends are going from like looking at the patterns and things that are being built up from what's going to come before. And things like that. So lots of the language by programming language kind of development and things has come from some of the new stuff like TypeScript and stuff. It's work that was done in the 70s and 80s, and we're now ready to we now have the capabilities to do some of those things and things there. And you see some of the same kind of database cycles and things of like, well, actually a lot of this work was done like even in like early 60s. Some of these ideas are being developed that we're now using with like graph database and all of those sorts of things. So that will be worth doing as well.
Yeah, great. Well, so curiosity, working in a team and learning the history to spot patterns, brilliant. And Neal, to sign off, the one or two pieces from you to add to that.
Not surprisingly, again, John's right on the money with curiosity. I think that curiosity and asking those questions, and frankly, the curiosity to go back in time and learn the history, builds a shared vocabulary. If you find yourself in a position where you have a shared vocabulary with others in your industry who have been in it longer, or others who are working alongside you who are not in your industry but are working closely with you, think project managers, stuff like that, the quickest you can get to a shared vocabulary, the better off you are in general. So if you're looking for career advice and those kinds of things, the ability to build that vocabulary, if you're anybody you're speaking to, that's a great thing to do. I also find that, especially early on in my career, I found myself very frustrated with things not going fast enough. You've learned something new, you get really excited about the thing that you learn, and you want to bolt off at 1,000,000 miles an hour, which that passion, employers like John and myself are absolutely looking for that, no question. But I think that passion has to be coupled with patience. A representative example of this, we had an engineer, John will remember exactly what I'm talking about. We had an engineer who, right out of uni, was absolutely passionate, recommended a platform and a direction of travel for one of our key products that was a brilliant idea, and about 2 years too early. It was 2 years too early because the complexity of running a SaaS business, the complexity of where we were going, the thing that was needed for the right then and right now wasn't that. They were right on the money, they were just too early. Had they been patient and they worked with their team and with the organizations around them to build towards that 2-year strategy, we would have been in a much better place. We're 5 years on and we still haven't built the thing that this person recommended. We're getting there. We're just not there yet. And so the reality is those kinds of things, as you start taking from the sort of hyperbolic examples or even the work experience examples you've come across and moving into actual real organizations, patience with that organization and understanding how all these different bits click together will make you absolutely successful in anything you want to do. You know, the reality is a lot of these organizations need help and they need guidance from you with the experience that you've got, but working with your teams and growing your organization in a slow and steady pace where possible is absolutely the best way. Now, I say that, but coupling with that, the only other thing I'd sort of harp on, and it's one of those tenets of the quote unquote DevOps, is continuous improvement. If you find yourself in a position where you are iteratively improving exactly what you're doing day in and day out, you are the kind of employee that will be promoted. You are the kind of employee that will be put on the best and most interesting projects. The fact is, any employer, any team member in general, are always looking for those individuals who are trying small iterative improvements throughout their day, be it to their own career, be it to the development teams and their processes at large. We instill that every single day in our organization, and it's one of the things that we consider to be a competitive advantage from any other organization in our industry, I'd say. The fact is our ability to improve, albeit at a very steady clip, not trying to do cataclysmic changes every 9 weeks, but slowly moving in a positive direction and improving the way that you're doing things over time. If you find yourself in a position where you're doing that, you're in a great place. Keep working there. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and that is brilliant. I think both of you have hit the nails on the head there. And actually, what's lovely is it's a bit more of a unique an evolved view of a lot of the advice that we've had over the past series or past podcasts, because it's super relevant. And yeah, passion with the patients, the shared vocabulary, learning the history, working in a team, and curiosity, they're all interlinked as well, which is exactly what it should be, I guess. And for many of our listeners, and we'll move to the summing of this up, because this is real life advice that will really help you, not just starting a career, but throughout your entire career. I think it's, and that's the great thing about this. We also, along with our STEM listeners, we have many listeners who are part of our communities who are already experienced engineers and thought leaders. And so what we've discussed today, I think, is actually evolved beyond graduates getting into work in STEM. It's actually really relevant throughout the entire industry. So thank you both. That's been super insightful. And can you believe that's another podcast coming up to an end? That the time has flown. Yeah. So
we really appreciate the time. It's always lovely to talk about these kinds of things.
And it's been fantastic having you on the show both. So for me, John, Neal, thank you very much for taking the time. As many of our listeners know, this is a total voluntary podcast that we post, and so anyone who are giving their time, we're very grateful. And to all our listeners, so that's another episode of the Future Tech podcast. The podcast, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, is on the career page of our 33 unis. It's also on arrowspodcasts.com and on Spotify. So we'll be posting the release on LinkedIn. And for today, for now, that's another episode of Future Tech. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.